Would you please help me in that RuralX way? Welcome to the stage, Tane Danger.
This is so nice. That's fun. That's good. Oh, look at this dancing. That's good. I like that. That's fun. Hi, RuralX. Am I on? All right. Hi, RuralX. So excited to be here. Thank you all so much for coming out, staying for this talk. So we've learned so many amazing things while we've been here today, and I'm actually really grateful and honored to be able to do sort of a toward the end talk here, because I'm hoping that some of the things that I have to say are a good way to maybe send us back out into the world and actually take some of the really good stuff that we've been learning over the last day and a half and put it into practice. And I think if you're anything like me, you're thinking right now, oh, it's hard, right? Yes, we've been in this wonderful sort of petri dish of great ideas and amazing things, and yet we've done it in this very kind of small, safe space. And so how do we take that out into the places that we serve when everything gets really hard and challenging? And so that's kind of what I want to talk about. But first, I should try and convince you that I have some right to be here, some credentials or something like that. So this is me, and a little bit of my background. So I started out my career right out of college working in the public sector. So I worked for the state of Minnesota for a year and a half for the state sesquicentennial. I joked, I was the communications director for the sesquicentennial, so I used to joke that my job was just to be able to get people to say the word sesquicentennial, which I didn't do that well at. So, but it was a good year celebration of Minnesota. I worked at some local nonprofits. I worked at big international nonprofits like Children's Heartland. And all along this time, I imagine maybe as some of you find, that there's all these people in the public sector, or what I sometimes just sort of shorthand as like the do-gooder sector, people who are doing good things in the world. And they're doing good, amazing things, but we're not always great in that space at telling our own story, right? Like, we are not always great at sort of communicating how important this work is, and this is, I think, often where we end up, is that we tell the story of, like, how important something is that we're doing, but we tell it in this very dire way, right? Like, hey, everybody, everything's really messed up, and you should care. It's bad. And that is, I always say to people, like, that might be true. It might be true that stuff is really bad and messed up, and yet we are probably a little bit limited in how many people are going to get excited about actually trying to be part of fixing things if all we're ever talking about is sort of how dire and terrible everything is. And so, while I was doing a lot of this work in sort of the public sector, I was also doing improv comedy. I started my improv comedy troupe as an undergrad at Gustavus in Minnesota. I did improv all coming out of college for years in sort of Minneapolis and the Twin Cities. And I thought, okay, there's something here, because I'm working in this sector in sort of the civic do-gooder space where people are doing really good work, but not great at telling their own story. And I'm doing improv, and improvisers are pretty good storytellers. So maybe there's some way to do those two things together. So I worked with a good friend of mine from college and who I'd been doing improv with. And we created this show where I talked to a smart person or a couple of smart people on stage about a big issue or a big idea, something like the things that we've been talking about here. Maybe it's, economic development. Maybe it's water quality. Maybe it's literally, civic pride in a place. Or maybe it's something that's really challenging, like tax policy or healthcare system. So talk to somebody who knows a lot about that issue on stage, and then add to that a team of 5 improv comedy artists who are listening to that whole conversation. And then their job is to bring everything that we have talked about to life through entirely unscripted improv comedy theater. And the result is this show that we made called The Theater of Public Policy. And it's what we've been doing since about we started it in 2011. And that's basically the premise of the show. We have big conversations about really important things. And then we have this team of amazing improvisers who actually brings to life the things that we've talked about. And my favorite description of the show was the Minneapolis Star-Tribune said, "Oh, it's like you're watching C-SPAN, and all of a sudden Saturday Night Live comes on and does sketches about what they were just talking about on C-SPAN." And so the hope of it is a couple of fold. One, that it is helping people maybe enter and engage in an issue or a set of issues that they might not otherwise come and pay attention to, right? So if I said to you like, hey, do you want to come and spend an hour and a half with me learning about water quality in the southern half of the state tonight? You might be like, oh man, I am actually going to be washing my hair for an hour and a half, probably contributing to the water problems. But if I said, hey, there's an improv comedy show all about water quality in the southern half of the state, you might be like, oh, that's interesting. That's weird. I will go and see that. And people did. People started coming out and coming to our shows and coming quite regularly to the point where it started building a following, and we had sort of a break-off point where the Minneapolis Institute of Arts actually hired me and my co-founder to be artists in residence with them for about 6 months, because they said, hey, if you can get people to pay attention for an hour and a half to like highway tax policy, can you do the same thing for Rembrandt? We were like, we can try. And so we did that with the museum for a while. But that work has continued and grown, and we've done shows about all the different kinds of things that you can imagine with a whole variety of different people. And the two things that I think are really valuable and important about it, that I think is valuable and important for this audience in thinking about, is one, it draws in a different kind of audience than you might expect. You know, when we first started doing this show, a lot of the peer sort of types of programs that we had to work or to think and compare ourselves to were things like, oh, it's a Saturday morning meeting at the library. And that's good, that's important, but, and I don't think that folks here would probably disagree, we kind of know who shows up to the Saturday morning meeting at the library. And it's kind of a lot of the same people. If you change up the format, if you actually make it fun and something that people want to come out to, you get a very different group of people who come out to that. Also, using art and improv and comedy as a way to like approach some of these issues made it so that we could get at things that were really hard to get at in a variety of other kinds of contexts. So, you know, I can ask, because you're using comedy, questions of folks who are big and important or maybe would normally dodge and duck things in a way that, because it's sort of off script and a little different, they don't sort of weasel out of it, I guess I would say, quite as easily. So we've grown a lot over the years, so we've done a lot of big shows. Like this is us with then Lieutenant Governor, now Senator Tina Smith from Minnesota. This is when Tim Walz, who's now the governor of Minnesota, and Lieutenant Governor candidate then, Peggy Flanagan, were running for office. We had several of the gubernatorial candidates on our show. Fun fact, and actually this is another piece that I think is really valuable for folks. Folks always assume that like when we have the politicians on our show, that's going to be the most interesting. I actually think the most interesting shows are when we have somebody who's like a real expert in something. So like we had Marla Spivak, who is the she is literally a MacArthur Genius Fellow grant recipient who studies bees, and she knows everything about bees. Like, she was one of the best guests we've ever had because she knows so much about that. Politicians are fine, they're good, they're whatever, but somebody who actually really is deep in the weeds on something, that's when it gets really exciting and fun. And getting to do it through this improv comedy lens sort of lets us open it up for an audience that wouldn't otherwise maybe get to hear from that person or wouldn't normally self-select to be part of that conversation. So We've worked with all these like very interesting folks because, again, when you find the way that you can say, oh, we can actually get some folks to come out and pay attention to something that we wouldn't normally pay attention to, people are interested in that. They want us to come out and do that for them, whether it's about housing, which we did with like CFED, or whether it's about healthcare systems with Mayo Clinic, or again, housing with Habitat for Humanity. Actually, our team was doing a show with Target this whole week about sustainability in sort of corporate America. At the same time, I went and actually studied public policy, which actually weirdly didn't happen until I had been doing the show for a couple of years. But I said, like, at some point, oh, if I'm going to run a show called The Theater of Public Policy, I should probably know something about public policy. And so I went and got my master's degree at the University of Minnesota, Humphrey School, which was valuable both in hopefully that it taught me something about public policy, but also I think it really reinforced something, again, I would guess a lot of the folks in this room appreciate. We set up sort of public policy, our public conversations, very often to be conversations among people who are already inside. Right? We set them up inherently to be conversations where you have to know the jargon. You have to already know the people who are there at the table. You have to know sort of who the players are and how things work in order to even be part of that conversation. And so, unfortunately, I would say, you kind of learn in public policy school, they're like, well, we'll teach you how to talk this language and how to be at this conversation. My whole passion and what I was interested in is like, okay, how do we blow that up? How do we make it so that we're actually talking to folks where they are? We're translating this kind of stuff and making it something that people who are maybe not normally thinking of themselves as public policy buffs like are very excited about and actually want to participate in. So I actually started teaching a class at the University of Minnesota, interestingly at the School of Design, where I'm teaching students there improv, and it's very much in this same ethos, because as I've talked a little bit about in the time I've gotten to be here with you all in some of the breakout sessions, improv is this wonderful way of approaching the world. It is about storytelling, it is about listening, and it is about, more than anything to me, collaborating and thinking about how can we, you and I, create something bigger together than either one of us could do by ourselves. That, I tell my students, is the essence of really good design, right? Really good design is us being able to work together in a team, in a partnership, in a small group, in a large company, and be able to do something together, whether it's designing a product, whether it's designing a system, solving a problem, figuring out how to do that together in a way that no one of us could do by ourselves. Now, the translation with this is that I think that that's also very much what our jobs are in the public sector, whether we're doing economic development or whether we are working as part of a chamber of commerce or we're at City Hall or wherever it is. Community is hopefully at its core about us being able to come together and be able to do things together that we could not do by ourselves. So, what are we gonna do? I'm gonna have you do one of the exercises I actually do with my students. And I think that I'm hoping that it'll get to this premise at the heart of it. So, okay, we did something similar where we turned to people near us before, so I'm gonna have you do that again. It's not terribly important how many people, but maybe make like a group of 5 or 6 people with the people sitting right around you. Okay, ready, set, turn to the people sitting around you, maybe somewhere between 4 and 6 people. You're making a small group. On your mark, get set, go. Okay, good. It's good to know. Okay, all right, you ready? Here's what we're gonna do. This is the most fundamental improv thing that I'm going to teach you all, but I think that it is a powerful way of going back out into the world after these days we've had together. Here, I want one person in your group to propose something. We'll be done here at RuralX in just an hour or so. What's something you think we should all go and do together? So you could say, I think we should all go out and get ice cream. We should all go out and get ice cream. One person will suggest whatever their idea is we should all do. here's what's going to happen. Every other person in the circle is going to say, no, we should not do that because, and then explain why because. So each person, so one person might say, no, we should not get ice cream because it's very fatty and I don't want it right now. No, we should not get ice cream because I'm lactose intolerant. No, we should not get ice cream because I need to drive home. But each person take a turn shooting down this idea. So one brave person who's ready to get their idea shot down 6 times. On your mark, get set, go. Okay, good job shooting down each other's ideas. Very good job shooting each other down. Fantastic. All right. Okay, we'll just remember how that felt. We're moving on. So somebody's going to propose a new idea, something different that we should all do after we're all done here today. This time, everybody is going to say, yes, but. So somebody might say, hey, I think that we should all go out and just take a nice walk around beautiful Mitchell while we're here together. And each person in your circle is going to say, yes, but. Yes, we should take a walk, but let's walk in separate directions. I don't know, whatever it is. So each person say yes, but to the idea. On your mark, get set, go. Okay, good job. Yay, good job sort of shooting each other down. All right, fantastic. All right, next one. Okay, last one. Some people probably know where I'm going with this. This time, somebody's going to propose a brand new idea, what you should all do together when we're done. This time, every person in the circle is going to say yes and to that idea. So I think that we should all go to the Corn Palace and we should put up our own mural. And the next person will say, yes, and the mural should be of, it should say RuralX. And the next person might say, yes, and we should use all native corns that we learned about earlier today from the sous chef. So each person say yes and, all right? On your mark, get set, go. Okay, good job. Give yourselves a round of applause. Yay! That's fantastic. All right, fantastic. So, yes and is like the most fundamental, foundational thing in improv. And it's very powerful because it is 2 things at once. It is both a philosophy, sort of a way of being in the world, and it is a very practical tool. And so I hope that you saw when you were doing this exercise, hopefully we don't have to spend a lot of time on the notion that if you are in a culture or you're in a workplace where somebody is proposing ideas and then everybody is just constantly saying, no, that won't work, no, that won't work, no, that won't work, that's not particularly buoying. That doesn't exactly make us want to keep going. And it's twofold. It's one, it shoots down that idea, which people always point out to me, well, there are bad ideas. And yes, absolutely there are. But if we live in a culture where all we ever do is say no to each other, it's not just that it shoots down that idea, it's that it makes it so that none of us really want to go and do the next idea either, right? Because we're like, well, look at how that person feels right now. I don't want to be that person. I think that actually what we kind of run into a lot more, particularly here in the Midwest, is this yes, but piece, right? Sometimes I just shorthand yes, but is like the Midwestern no. Because it's like, yes, that is a great idea, but let's never do it. Which I think comes up all the time in your work and the things that we do. Yes, and is so powerful because it is not just saying, yes, this is a good idea. That's easy. It's easy to tell somebody, sure, that's a good idea. Go ahead, go do it, whatever. Saying yes and is me both saying to you, yes, that's a good idea, and I am going to invest in it. I am going to add something to it. And now it's not just your idea. Now I've added something to it, so now it's our idea. If you say yes and back, now you've added something back into it. And again, very quickly, we're growing this thing to be something bigger than either one of us would have come up with by ourselves. But you would say oh, but Tane, that's wonderful in an improv context, but what, I don't live in an improv world, so what does that have to do with me? This is a way of thinking about being in the spaces that you're in. And I think that the challenge on the table, particularly going out of a conference like this, is can we go back out into the world and say yes and to ideas and to possibilities and to things that come our way. And I have examples of times when this has happened in unlikely ways and it works out. So my favorite one, which is recent, is that I had this idea about a year ago or so now, where I ride the bus a lot. I live in Minneapolis, and I ride the bus all the time. And if you've ever been in most big cities, but Minneapolis is particularly true, there's a lot of buses that just you see them and you're like, I have no idea where that bus goes. Like it's a route I've never taken before. It just goes in all kinds of different directions. And so I said to our Metropolitan Transportation Agency, Metro Transit, like, hey, what if we did a web series, and the whole web series was just me going on bus routes and saying, hey, where does this bus go? And then I just ride the bus from one end to the other and chat with people. And there are 1,000,010 reasons why our gigantic metropolitan government bus agency should have said, that is an insane idea. Why would we spend money on hiring you, improv man, in order to ride a bus and just talk to people on it? This doesn't make any sense. But they didn't. They said yes. And so we ended up creating this series called, Hey, Where Does This Bus Go? It's a clever title from literally my question. And so here, this is a quick, this is the first about a minute of the very first episode that we did.
My name is Tane Danger. I am here at the Uptown Transit Center. I ride the bus a lot, but a lot of times you see a new bus, you see a bus route, and you think, oh, I don't really know anything about that bus route. So today, we're going to start something brand new. It's a series that I like to call, Hey, Where Does This Bus Go? So we're going to start with a bus that I actually ride quite a bit in my life. It's called the 23, and we're going to figure out, where does this bus go? It's going to be great. All right, let's go. I love this microphone. Okay, let's go on. Let's get on the bus. Where are we right now?
We're at Lake Street and Hennepin Avenue going south.
I wouldn't want to talk this early in the morning either. Okay, another big landmark here, Lakewood Cemetery.
I bike most of the time.
Oh, you bike most of the time, even right now when it's like 2 degrees outside.
That's why I'm on the bus.
Yeah, that's smart. This is one of the places it goes, which is Nicollet and 38th. Fun fact, we're going by my house. They don't care. It's fine.
I'm going to the school. Actually, I am a teacher, so.
Oh, you're a teacher. What do you teach?
I teach 4th grade.
4th grade? That sounds hard.
Yeah, it is.
The light rail ate up a lot of our friends on the bus, but you gotta take that journey then, and you gotta say goodbye to this part of your life and start a new life on the blue line.
So that's the first of the 2 episodes that we made, and you might be like, well, that's cute and that's fun. It's actually been tremendously successful against all odds and likelihood. So in addition to getting literally tens of thousands of views on their different social media channels, it's been featured on our CBS station. It's been in our local alt weekly. It's been in our newspaper. And one of the crazy things is it's gotten hundreds of comments on the website about it, and they're all positive, which doesn't happen normally. And yes, I read all the comments because I'm a glutton for punishment. But the point is, this is all an example of if we say yes to some things, and we say yes and we take a risk, we try something different, really amazing, wonderful things can happen. And as folks who were in my breakout session earlier heard, there is a question with something like this, well, what if it hadn't worked, right? What if it hadn't gone great or people didn't really care? I guess the big question is how big of a loss would that have been, right? In this case, I'm a pretty cheap date in order to do something like this. This was literally me and a person holding a camera, riding a bus for about 2 hours. So it wasn't a huge investment of time or money or resources. And the impact that it's had has been wildly more bigger than it has from there. And now we're at a place where both the Metropolitan Transit Agency and the local Chamber of Commerce is so interested in it that they're trying to start promoting it, making it happen more. So you're still probably saying, oh, but Tane, this isn't me. I'm not a funny improv comedy person or whatnot. And one of the things that I really want to encourage you to try and take home with you is that this stuff really is not sort of oh, you are funny or not funny, you are a comedian or you're not a comedian, you're an improviser or not an improviser. These are muscles. These are things that we can practice and use in terms of creativity. And so there's this guy who, Dr. Lamb, who does a very good TED Talk all about, he actually did this amazing study where he took jazz musicians and he put them in an MRI machine while they were freestyle jazz creating. And what he found is that your brain actually starts firing differently when you ask it to think freely and to think creatively. And you ask it to do things outside of what it normally does. Now, for me, that's improv. For you, that could be doodling on a piece of paper. It could be, tapping the keys on a piano. It could be going and just hanging out with a friend and talking about something you haven't talked about before. But the real lesson here is that you can actually develop and practice these muscles. And there's a lot in here that I could go into more. This is actually, I'll just say quickly, this is actually my boss at the University of Minnesota, Barry Kurtowitz, and he did these studies where he actually showed, if you're looking for sort of like making the case to folks about why this is so important, he did these studies where he would have one group of people brainstorm a set of ideas, and then he would have another, and just cold, and then he would have another group of people do some sort of warm-up together, some improv-based warm-up together. And what he found is that the people who actually did some sort of creative warm-up together, who had actually sort of flexed and used their brains in this way before they had gotten into that brainstorming phase, created many more ideas and many more ideas that actually went to fruition. So the last example that I'll just say quickly as I'm about out of time here is one other place that we've had this wonderful collaboration. We've been sponsored for a long time by a beer company in Minneapolis called Finnegan's Brewery. They're a great brewery, and you should check them out. But they sponsored us for a long time, and this is a great yes and. They opened their first physical location about a year or so ago, and they were like, oh, we want to have tours of our brewery. And as we heard from several people today, they're like, let's actually hire some artists to lead those tours instead of just anybody. So because they had worked with us, they hired us to do their tours of their brewery, which turned out to be very successful. People actually really liked it. They're like, this was actually very fun because it was people who know how to sort of entertain folks leading around a tour of a brewery. And so then we said, well, hey, this was good, yes, and can we do more things like that? And so we worked with them on blowing this out into doing a tour of the entire neighborhood that starts there at the brewery, and then we do a historic tour of the neighborhood where we lead people around and do historic facts. And then just a couple of weeks ago, this kind of grew into, there was a big program at Minneapolis called Doors Open Minneapolis, where hundreds of buildings all across Minneapolis opened up for folks to come out and explore their spaces. And Anderson Windows had seen what we had done with Finnegan's, and so they're like, oh, will you come and lead our tours as part of this? And again, all of these things, like, it's very simple, but it starts with just sort of that initial, like, somebody saying, yes, let's try this thing, let's experiment, let's do something where it grows a little bit and see what happens and be willing to take that risk. So my last slide, and this is the one that I'm really hoping to leave you with, because, again, I know that I'm up here and I'm trying to talk to you about how important and valuable all this is, and there's some part of your brain that's like, yeah, but I'm going to go back to my community, and it's going to be so hard, and it's going to be filled with people who are going to say, no, we can't do it for all these reasons. I really believe in this stuff, and I actually have examples of how it works. And this is one of my favorite examples is we did a show a couple of years ago now with then Congressman Tim Walz, who's a Democrat, and Congressman Tom Emmer, who's a Republican. And at the end of the show, the two of them were laughing and having this wonderful time together because we engaged them in this beautiful art and comedy, and we invited them to be part of something that was different, that was outside, I think, what they are normally invited to be part of. And we broke the narrative, I guess I would say, that these two people are meant to just fight and be angry at each other and be sort of at loggerheads all the time. And we used art and comedy and theater in order to do that. So when you think about, like, oh, things are so difficult and so hard and so problematic, and I think about that a lot, I think about something like this, where these two people on TV have every reason to go after each other and be angry with each other, and yet here, in this moment, and maybe it was just a moment left over after there was some beautiful bit of improv and comedy that happened on stage, they're able to laugh together, and they're able to be human together and to see each other as regular people. And that's what I think we need a lot more of in the work that we do and the communities that we serve and the people that we're trying to bring together. And so my invitation to you all is to go back to your communities and take that spirit of yes and teach other people that spirit of yes and. Because it's easy to say no. It's easy to even just say yes. But to say yes and, to invite other people to be part of something, to invest in other people that way, that is how we all can make a really big difference for our communities, for our cities, for our state, for our country, for the whole world. And that, I think, is why we're all here. So, with that, I will say thank you all so much for taking the time, a little bit of extra time. And, I don't know, I will turn it back over to John if you have any questions for me.
Give him a round of applause first.